Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
So this week happening around the world are two really big conferences. One that's been going on for many, many years, decades, is the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. And a lot of people from the Middle East go there. A lot of brands are recognized for their advertising work as well. Some of the best creative talent in the region win awards at Cannes. And another event, which is only in its second year, is the New Creativity. The Artists of NFTs is happening in NYC, New York City, NFT. So two big conferences happening at the moment, and I was fortunate enough to attend the event last night for Fast Company Middle East, and they were celebrating Creative People in Business Awards. So it got me thinking a lot about creativity in business, and they really recognize and acknowledge some of the best creative talents in leadership positions in the UAE last night. And such as our guest today comes from the fashion industry, but really is all about creativity and how she set up her new brand. Well, I say new, it's 4 years old, but her brand in jewellery is around that kind of creative industry as well. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week we're joined by Priyanka Sarkar. She is the CEO of House of Biori. So they are a contemporary sustainable jewellery brand, and they're redefining the market in the UAE while also adapting in the digital age. We're going to hear all about that and how Priyanka started off with the House of Biori, the industry, all about the fashion design jewellery industry, especially here in Dubai. And the trends in sustainability and also their plans for the business in the future. Good morning, Priyanka.
Good morning, Richard.
Thanks for joining us today on the show.
Pleasure is all ours.
So tell us a little bit about House of Biori.
Well, I think being in the corporate side of design and buying for the last 16 years, the brand is 4 years old as we speak. There was this very strong inner calling to get back into the roots and do something which is about giving back. Now, I belong to a lineage of art historians, restoration artists, and product specialists who have spent their lives working with craftsmen, working with artisans. And so that whole, I would say, that interface with sustainability and sustainable practices and craft has been there from a very start of me growing up. So for me to go back and start something on those lines was, I think, a very natural progression. And that's how House of Biori started 4 years ago, where it is an evolving contemporary brand. And I'm fortunate that I work with artisans in Eastern Europe, India, and Thailand, crafting pieces which are beautifully created with love, involving natural materials, semi-precious stones, with a very value-led, transparent supply chain. Tight pricing, great designs, and very unique pieces for both men and women.
Amazing. Okay, brilliant. So you said this brand and this business is 4 years old.
Yes.
And is that you had a business before that, or you were in the industry?
I've been in the industry. It's been now this is my 20th year as we speak.
Yeah.
And I'm a design person. I'm a design person by training and as a professional, and who very quickly moved on to the buying side of the business, because I think as an individual, I've always been someone who's very keen to understand the design to sales journey. Hence, I think getting onto the other side of retail was a very, I would say, a very natural shift, which I think was a great blessing in disguise, because that allowed me to look into the product right from the point of designing to the point of growing the product to the point of creating point of sales for that particular product. And the journey started with me working in India with some of the top-notch companies, took the ladder up as we progressed. And then in 2011 is when I landed in this beautiful city of Dubai.
Okay.
And since then, there's not been a looking back. It's been amazing here, worked with some of the best organizations, had some fabulous mentors in the region, both in India as well as in Dubai, and also in US prior coming to Dubai. So yes, it's been a great ride. I think it's been an amazing journey. You've got to see every aspect of design, and I think I've been fortunate to travel almost every city that probably thrives in fashion.
Yeah.
So the exposure and the experience has been very, very inspiring.
Yeah.
And yes, it's been awesome. So when I thought of doing my own, I think jewelry was a very natural product to come forward, because for me personally, it has always been the exclamatory mark in your wardrobe. I
You're
can
wearing
see you
nice
seeing the
jewelry
pieces.
today. Yeah.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
And I think it has that, I think jewelry is that little Midas touch, which kinds of can probably lift up any outfit that you're wearing. So yeah, I think that's where the whole thing came. And somewhere down the line, creating that awareness towards sustainable jewelry was something which was it was a very strong calling, Richard, because I personally felt that as much as the customer is willing to understand sustainable fashion in terms of apparel, the whole understanding on jewelry is still a very evolving concept. And we need more people to come forward to, talk about that, celebrate that, embrace that, and get that, go all out into the mainframe market.
Interesting. We'll talk a lot more about sustainability, and I think you've teed it up quite nicely there. Where does the name come from?
That's interesting. So Biori is the phonetic, the full form is Be Original, where BI is the phonetic of BE. So hence it's Be Original, Be Biori.
Yeah, okay.
Where Biori.
You're original. And Priyanka, so you studied fashion design.
I studied fashion design, yes.
And then you were looking for a career in it, and you worked across the industry in retail,
Yes.
in fashion design,
Yes.
garments, clothes,
Yes.
retail,
Yes.
and then into the buying side of it.
Yes.
And how did you navigate that career? Because if you did that for 16 years, you obviously got to understand the industry really well.
Right.
So how did you kind of navigate that? Was it what you imagined it would be as a wide-eyed student? Did you think it was going to be as glamorous as it was?
I think I love the word glamour there. People who are not in the fashion industry, they always kind of think that fashion is all about glamour. Yes, there is that touch of bling in that occupation, but there is a lot more into it, which is a lot of hard work, which is a lot of resilience. And it is not an easy industry to be with, because you have to constantly upgrade your skills. You need to be constantly upgrading yourself in terms of your know-how, in terms of your exposure, in terms of your knowledge, because you're in an industry which is ever changing. And it's an industry which is very consumer led. So any economic downturn, it will have a direct impact on retail. Any emotional upheavals, it will have an impact on retail. So there is a constant engagement that people in the fashion industry, they need to have with their surroundings. Coming to the other part of your question, did I envisage all of this while I was in college? To an extent, yes. To an extent, no. Yes, why? Because I always knew that I will come up with my own identity in terms of a label, which I think is a very natural desire that anybody who's a design enthusiast or a design student wants to be into. When I would do that, that was something that I was not clear. What I was clear was that I need to be able to gauge all the necessary knowledge and experience that is needed before I set on that entrepreneurial journey. Because when you are on the other side of the table, which is where you are working for somebody else, your rules are very well laid out. You're given, whether it's a boxless environment or whether you are working within a certain box, there are territories that are earmarked for you. Whereas when you come onto the entrepreneurial side of the business, it's all about you. There are no territories marked. And it's good and it's bad. Bad from the point that if you don't know the other sides or the other aspects, it can take you haywire. So that clarity was there in me somewhere. I think somewhere as an individual, I always try and know what I don't know, and I acknowledge that. And accordingly, I changed my ways and mend my ways rather. So yes, it was a very natural progression, rather, yeah, a very natural flow of keeping that decision of starting your own on the side burner for a while, till I felt that okay, I'm ready. And honestly, I think I would have not been ready 4 years ago as well,
Okay.
because.
But you started it 4 years ago.
4 years ago, because the comfort that you get when you're on the other side of leading a team, having the best of the things under your feet, everything is given to you in a platter. All you're doing is you're performing and you're being aggressive about it. It has its own high, it has its own way of making you look at things. When you take this other side of the table, which is where you need to leave all of that and start from ground zero, I think it takes a lot of courage. But yeah, I've been fortunate. I've had a great support system and some interesting rude awakenings.
Yeah, definitely.
Which kind of pushed the baton and said, okay, now, girl, get going.
And how did you make the jump? So the aspiration was there to have your own label. And obviously with that sort of duration of a career, you mightn't have the confidence or the belief that you know everything, but you kind of do, right? You've seen all sides of an industry. You've seen the design side, the sales side, the buying side. You've traveled. You're not intimidated by other markets. You kind of know that you've got this.
Correct.
But still you have to take the plunge. You have to leave the security of a regular income.
Yes.
And how did you approach that?
Honestly, it was, I think, a very emotionally overwhelming experience, because before taking the plunge, I think as a career, it's been a fantastic innings. I've been really lucky, have had a fantastic time on the corporate side, worked with some of the best ones. So I think somewhere down the line, that comfort had kind of probably laid some seeds of complacency in terms of being very, you're very comfort in your space or where you are. And work-life balance had gone over the roof. I would not be not honest about it, because buying as a career is a very demanding line, and the higher you rise the ladder, the more demanding it becomes. Where you're traveling 267 days in a year, and you're literally living out of suitcases in airports. It's not an easy ride. As much as it is creatively satisfying, it does take a toll on you. And I think I was at a phase where it was taking a toll on me. And I wanted to kind of get into a phase where I could probably do a little bit of a better work-life balance and a better, I would say, a better justice to my own creative calling. So there was this urge of doing things that I would want to do in the way I would want to take it forward, vis-a-vis what I was doing under a given guideline or under a given SOP, let's put it that way. So, yes, and I think that's something which kind of really pushed to take it forward. And, there's not you can't really pinpoint and say, was that the day that it happened? I think there were certain alarms on the health side which kind of triggered the decision-making faster, where I was like, okay, I have to kind of take that step down. I have to get a time off. I have to get back into what I do best, which is getting back to my own roots.
It's an interesting commentary of the industry you were in, given the demands of the travel, because it is full on, indeed. Right? Whether it's not the fashion shows, you have to go on buying trips, you have to go to factories, you have to look at things all the time.
Right.
And it's interesting that you put it that way, because some people in a corporate are kind of 9 to 6ers, and then it's the opposite. If they do a startup, that's when the work-life balance becomes difficult, because the work-life balance in the startup is non-existent. You have to do everything yourself. It's always on, and things like that. But given the industry that you were in, you had more control when you did it yourself.
Right.
And how did you do it financially? Did you raise funds? Did you have a business plan? How did you kind of, approach this? And what does it entail to launch a jewelry brand investment-wise? How do you manufacture the products and things like that?
Wow, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, it is. Let's just narrow.
I'll try and break it into parts and answer. If I'm missing out on something, let me know, Richard.
Okay.
Okay. In terms of funding, the See, one thing I was very clear that because it's a risk that I am taking, I wanted to take that risk all on myself rather than being answerable to anybody else's funds, which means there was no piggy banking that was involved in my thought process. Uh, it works for a lot of people. For whom it works, great. For me, it was a very conscious decision of taking my own line of control, and it would have only happened if I was financially independent from the start. So the initial investment was my own investment. So whatever savings I had with reference to the money that I garnered over my corporate years, a major chunk of it is went into starting. I wanted to get the groundwork right, which means all the fundamental deliverables of whether it's your trademark, whether it's your legal, whether it's your setting up. And that ways, we are blessed to be in a country like UAE where the rules are very clear, it's very transparent, it's very well laid out. If you go by the rules, everything happens to you at a certain designated time period. So it was easy from that point of view of it was not cumbersome, it was not very it wasn't confusing, and that's how the thing started in terms of the germinating of the brand. And what followed is history in terms of the route that we take, in terms of the path that we took. One experience led to the other, one learning led to the other. And I think the whole experience of entrepreneurship is more like personally, I would say it's more like a route to self discovery where you are constantly learning, unlearning, relearning. And I think that's the most beautiful part of being on this side, where every day is a new day. And there are mad days, there are good days, there are exceptional days, but there's not a boring day ever. So, so the funding, coming back to that question, yes, it is a self-funded enterprise. It still remains to be a sole propriety. Do I intend to bring in investors or partners on board? Honestly, yes, as long as they understand and have the appetite towards craftsmanship, design-led product identities, as long as they understand the pain that one has to go through when you're establishing a brand versus looking at it only from a business point of view, because these two are two completely different journeys. For me, building a brand is something that I'm focusing on, and business will come through. It is always something that follows you through if your fundamentals are right. And at this stage, I'm building the fundamentals, and I would like to do it the way it is supposed to be done rather than making any commercial compromises. Because the moment I think you bring in a second or a third party and you bring in more ears and eyes, you would need to start taking decisions which are more quantifiable, ROI led. Whereas for me, at this stage, where the brand is, there has to be a covalent mix of a qualitative as well as a quantitative ROI, because you are trying to build a sustainable jewelry brand in a region that thrives on options, which starts from something very cheap and cheerful to something very exclusive. So finding that space for yourself in that market is not an easy task, but and it requires a lot of sustained steps at various stages to ensure that the brand stays where it is. And I think at this stage, it's nice to keep it tight, rather than expand the hands and get into too many commitments and deliverables.
Interesting. But I think, thanks for answering that, because I think we get a sense of how you've approached House of Biori. And what I was getting at was people don't necessarily think of how do you set up a jewelry brand. And we might see examples of influencers with jewelry lines, but that is often backed by a brand. It's often backed by factories. It's often backed by designers, etc. And then we see fashion labels launch by career type designers, and they launch a fashion label. And then I wonder what goes into it are in terms of what investment is needed. And then I try and relate that to the day that we're interesting in an intro. We talked about digital, but the modern day we're in now, how much of what you might have needed before can be replaced with partnerships with digital, with e-commerce and things like that. Like, for example, with House of Biori, do you need a store? Do you need a store in a mall? Probably not, right?
Not right.
so you don't
I'm
need.
glad you're already getting that.
But right. So I think that from that point of view, you don't
Yes.
need 20 years ago, you needed a store,
Right.
or you needed to be distribution partners.
Right.
So how do you building it organically? I get from your answer, but again, like, what are the decisions that you're making versus what are the tools available to you as well? Like, where do you manufacture the jewelry? Yeah.
So see, with Biori, anything that you don't like, I would say I'm the one to be blamed. For starters, anything you like, it's always my artisans because they are the real heroes. The process so Biori, it's a very design-led process that we follow. So right from the research part of the brand, in terms of where we research the trends, we research on various aspects on the trends, to putting the designs on the design board, to working with the artisans directly on converting those designs into technical sheets. Then from there it gets onto the whole process of molding. Then from molding it gets on to CADs. So there are various technical interim stages before you actually see that product as a 3D form from a sketch. So that's one side, which is the entire design interface. And in that entire process, we keep the communication channel very transparent. We do not keep any middlemen involved. There are no commission-led work that's happening. It is a very direct relationship between the designer, which in this case is me, with my artisans, who are based in these 3 different parts of the world, as I shared earlier. So the equation is very personal. It is very close to heart. And that's one aspect. On the other side, in terms of the distribution of the brand, Richard, thrives on exclusivity. One of the strongest USPs of the brand is that it is not seen everywhere, which means it is not something that is available to anybody walking around the street. Does that make a difference, or am I saying that I don't want sustainability to be reaching out to the common man? No, that's not the point. The point here is to connect with the kind of audience who really, truly have an appetite of appreciating design-led craftsmanship. The brand is very high on aesthetics, Richard. So what happens is, even if the pricing, say, for a piece on an average, even if it's, say, a 200 dirhams, the aesthetic attribute of it is at a different platform altogether. You need a certain kind of mindset. You need a certain kind of personality who would be able to connect with that. And for me, it's very important, whom am I selling to rather than how many pieces am I selling. So that is a constant, I would say, jugglery that happens on a day-to-day basis. The kind of places that the brand is, for example, we are stationed with with Indigo Hotel, or we are there with the Dubai Creek, the Park Hotel. Now, these are places where the kind of population who gets onto these hotels, like Indigo Hotel in itself is the first sustainable hotel in UAE, and everything in that place talks about design, talks about being eclectic, and I think a perfect platform for a brand like us. Even for that matter, the Park Hotel at the Dubai Creek, which is, again, it thrives on people who are golfers. So again, golf is a very finer sport that people connect with. So every positioning of the brand, or the kind of spas that we are into, or the kind of multi-designer curated stores that we are into, they're all very differentiated. They may not be the mainframe multi-branded international design stores that the world reckons with. And honestly, I'm happy in that little space because it reaches to the right audience who understands that piece, who understands what goes on. Because every piece in Biori is a hero. Every piece has its own story, which is connected to its metal, to its material, to its origin. There is a nice organic flow to the stones that we work with. We don't chop, chip, polish or cut them and make them all look cookie cut pieces. So organically, each piece is different. You may have the same design, but the design may have certain irregularities, which is something that we celebrate in the brand. So it is something which is very high on design sensibility. And it's important that I keep that constant. So for me, every new spot that I pick up for the brand, be it the platforms on which I'm communicating, like today I'm with you, a perfect platform to take the story forward, because you guys are known for your differentiated anchoring and a very differentiated platform that you bring forward makes perfect synergy for the brand to be thriving on.
Yeah, interesting. I get more of a feel of how you're creating the brand and what it stands for as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the sustainability part
Sure.
of the. So people can maybe have an understanding of sustainable fashion,
Right.
in how they're produced and the emissions and the garments and the materials and what is used to go into it, and plastic and things like that shouldn't be used. But in terms of jewelry,
Right.
metal, I assume, maybe I'm naive, types of materials for jewelry are more sustainable anyway than clothing. Is that right?
That's interesting. Actually, metal mining is one of the most, I would say, one of the most toxic pollutants in the
Wow.
environment
Okay.
if it's not done rightfully. And there is a whole lot of work that the luxury fine jewelry brands, be it a Boucheron or a Chopard or even a Bulgari, is putting into in getting this workmanship right globally. And we at our end, the little brands, we are trying to kind of take the baton forward by working, for starters, working with cold metals, as in cold metals which are ethically mined, ethically sourced, which do not have any hazardous effects on the environment, like the silver and the gold and the brass for that matter. Consciously, we stay away from the cheap and cheerful metals. Would not want to name them because a lot of jewelry brands thrive on that. And that's one. Second is the
Are
choice
the
of.
cheap metals environmentally
They're
worse?
environmentally worse. They're hazardous. They are way more hazardous than picking up plastic bags and using plastic bags and throwing them in the ocean.
In what way?
They cannot be recycled for
Yeah.
starters, and over a period of time, the erosion, it creates harmful gases, and that is way more harmful than the carbon dioxides that one is seeing thriving around. That metal technically should be either consumed in really controlled quantities, or should be probably, in my opinion, completely banned in terms of bringing it on jewelry. Because see, jewelry as an industry, it thrives on impulse buys, because you never go buying jewelry out of a need. It is more of an emotional connect, or it's more on an impulse. It's important that that people understand the importance of buying less but buying good quality, well-made jewelry with the right metal, rather than picking up these cheap and cheerful bling pieces which looks good today and after 2 months they just wear off, they rust away. And what you do, you just kind of junk them out. Either you throw them away or you kind of break them into pieces. Everybody does their own thing, but end of the day, it doesn't do anything good to the environment. It just becomes a part of the dumping ground and way more hazardous than anything else. So yeah, metal toxins does play a very vital role.
Which metals did you choose and for what reasons?
So I work with silver and brass. They are essentially cold metals, cold pressed metals, where they are sourced rightfully. There are no unethical mining that is involved in these two metals or in their processes. Even gold is great. Technically, at this stage, I don't work with gold. But again, gold mining in itself is an area which is quite controversial. I'm sure you would have read various articles on that. It's still an industry that is going through change of processes. Being said that, silver and brass is still a way more safer and a way more conducive to the environment. If you see the sustainable brands worldwide, most of the brands, they thrive on silver as one of their chosen materials, because it's a cold metal, which means it is a metal which is good to your body, good to your soul, good to the environment. And it's a great platform and a great canvas for the designers to work on.
Interesting. So let's segue a little bit into the industry, and on that point of sustainability, what do you think? You've been in Dubai for around 11 years. Yeah.
Yes.
And so what do you think of how the city has evolved around the consumer awareness of sustainable products? Do you think it's changed in that time?
Very interestingly, it has indeed. I think, for starters, we are fortunate to be in a region like UAE, which has more than, I would say, 200 nationalities, and it's an ever transient population. So that makes the consumer very agile, very aware. And the consumer now, especially post COVID, is way more wary of the purchases they make. They are way more adaptive towards brands that they relate to. And I think over the years, the whole necessity, or the whole, I would say, the inclination towards picking up brands out of sustainable choices is something that has really picked up. And it's also got to do a lot with how the government has taken this forward, be it doing the entire sustainability pavilion in Expo, where it literally opened to the world what can be done in that segment, to doing holding summits and webinars and forums in the past prior to Expo, to kind of giving that added impetus to women entrepreneurs and anybody who would want to come forward with a sustainable project. And I think it's got to do a lot from that leadership, where when the leader itself is trying to push the audience, and then there are many brands in the region who have also consciously worked towards changing their philosophies and changing their hands towards how they are making the product and how they are communicating the product, be it the local design players who are there in the region, who initially were typically fast fashion brands, and now we know there's a conscious effort of changing that game towards sustainability, to international players like in the fast fashion categories like the H&M and Zara. And why I am taking considering fast fashion, because that itself is one of the largest quadrant of uh, segment that the audience here in Dubai buys, as compared to the luxury part. And luxury also has gone through a lot of sustainable practices and changes. The whole influx of lab created diamonds and the whole communication of that on various platforms. So I think a lot of forces are coming together in general to create that awareness. Now, government's whole initiative of banning plastic bags and pushing everybody to get onto reusable bags. Again, it's something where there's a constant effort that is being instilled, or that is being tried to be instilled in the normal average consumer, to look at things more qualitative rather than just picking up things on a use and throw basis. So yes, there's been a great shift. And I think post COVID, the shift has been a lot more conscious, where people do, I think, understand the need of buying less but buying good, so that they're able to carry that forward over a longer period of time. And that's where well made, crafted pieces, whether it's in jewelry or it's in clothing or it's in home or home accents, it plays an important role.
In your experience, is the shift to more sustainable fashion design and jewelry design driven by consumer demand, or is it driven by industry professionals like yourself who understand the process and are doing it from within?
I think it's a blend of both, Richard. Somewhere down the line, I think the average consumer also understands, or has rather started to understand, of going back to basics and staying in an environment which is more simpler and more manageable by self. I think COVID has been an amazing, I would say, an amazing teacher on that front, where everybody was reduced to be looking at after themselves all by themselves. So in an environment like that, it's important that you connect with your basics. So that's one aspect which I think has played a very important role, because you suddenly do see a huge rise in sustainable brands post COVID, in all aspects of the business. And the whole reason being is because that strong urge of going back to basics, that strong urge of looking back onto your wardrobe and seeing what you have, and trying to bring that forward with a sense of newness, with a sense of a little touch here and a little touch there. I think that is bringing back that whole. Rather not bringing back, rather it's pushing forward sustainable practices. You would now see a lot more second-hand, hand-me-down luxury closet environments, where people would want to barter or would want to engage in second-hand products, because they want to buy conscious. They want to encourage in shopping consciously, and shopping local, and shopping and supporting small businesses. So I think that's one aspect. And the other side, yes, individuals like us and more powerful individuals are coming forward with their own endeavors and their own efforts in shifting the baton towards more conscious, sustainable, ethical, consumerism led practices.
Interesting. Good to know. And just kind of segueing a little bit onto jewelry and the city.
Right.
Dubai is well known for gold souks. It's well known for tourists. It's well known for
Indeed.
a lot of purchasing of
Right.
jewelry. And there's also a huge commodities free zone here,
Right.
which does a lot with diamonds trade and
Right.
things like that, the DMCC. What's your view of that as Dubai being not a jewelry hub, but essentially a kind of capital for trading of jewelry and commodities and things like that?
I think it's an amazing platform because again, Dubai being a city which thrives on so many different kinds of population, it also brings in different kinds of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
That is available and different qualities of gold from worldwide. So it kind of becomes the perfect pitch platform for anybody who wants to do something in that category and create that buzz out, because where else, in rather which other part of the world will you have 200 nationalities having an opinion about your work if it is presented in the right forum? That's only something that is available in a city like Dubai.
Do you think it gives someone like you who's created a jewelry brand in a city like this credibility? For example, if I created a watch in Switzerland, it might help, right? Is there something to that with jewelry in Dubai, in the city of bling, in the city of gold?
See, I think if I was dealing with gold as my metal, like if I was dealing with fine jewelry, then I think my answer would have been a little more tweaked. I don't deal with gold jewelry. I deal with silver and brass with semi-precious stones. And
Yeah.
that's a range that you essentially operate on silver and brass, because you're not working with diamonds, you're working with other semi-precious stones. And
Yeah.
those are the kind of stones that you essentially work on silver and brass. And there is definitely a very strong appetite for something like that. And thankfully, for these kind of stones or for this sort of a making, you don't really have a designated city in the world that you would say, oh, that city, this sort of jewelry happens very well. Yes, there would be cities in the world which would be known for a certain kind of stone. Like if you're going to a Singapore, you would want to come back with a nice jade. Or if you're going to an Austria, would want to come back with a nice tourmaline. Or if you're going to Prague, you would want to come back with a nice opal. They're individual stones with individual cities that they
Interesting.
thrive on. But when it
knowledge.
comes to but when it comes to knowing is there a city or a country in the world where you are which is known for doing beautiful semi-precious stone jewelry? No. But there are pockets. There, like for example, the Indian jewelers, they are known for their workmanship and craftsmanship with bigger, chunkier pieces or more finer pieces in gold and other metals. Then there's Thailand. Then there is the Eastern Europe side. Then there is Singapore. Then there is Korean jewelry. So, but each country has their own unique footprint, has their own unique signature. And Dubai becomes the perfect pitch platform because you are able to, if the need be, you're able to bring in pieces from these parts of the world and showcase them guilt-free. Or if the need be, you can travel out to these parts and create your own base and then work as per your own music and your own melody.
Brilliant, interesting. But having said that, you know, I'm thinking of a well-known jewelry brand that's from Dubai. I think it's from Dubai, Damas.
Yes.
Jewelry, and there is pedigree, there is precedent, I guess, for building a jewelry brand out of here. You know, it is possible to do. It's not like, hey, that's the desert, they can't make jewelry.
Right.
Like you can create a jewelry brand here. It's not totally unusual. And is that your view? You know, you choose to sort of set it up here as opposed to your homeland, maybe.
Yes.
And would that be to sort of align with that creativity and craftsmanship of the city?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because for me, when I started, yes, you're right. I would have always had an option of going back to my homeland and doing something there. But the whole idea was to bring it into an audience which is more transient and which is, because for me, it was more like, Dubai was more like a litmus test platform of trying to bring out a new concept in an evolving segment like sustainable jewelry for an audience that is ever changing, and the good part is there is no set culture or heritage that the city comes out with in Dubai, because there's so much of a transient influx of population. So when you don't really have a very strong, yes, there's a very strong Middle Eastern heritage, which resides in various parts in the country, but there is also a side which is ever changing, and that ever changing brings in a lot of fluidity, in terms of their choices, in terms of what they would like to see. That's where brands like us, I think it's a great platform, because you are able to test the waters in a very small pot across, I would say, various takers. Whereas on the other hand, if I had to do something like this in my homeland has its own very strong cultural heritage, which also comes with its very strong yes and no's. And it would take a while for me to first blend into those yes and no's, then create your space, then bring out something. Not saying it's not doable. It is very doable, but I think it is a more time consuming and a more patience consuming exercise, vis-a-vis doing something like that in a city like Dubai, where it is very pro doing things on your own. I mean, the government supports you when you want to pick up either it as a side hustle or you want to go all out. Like look at this place. Every second corner has a free zone. I mean, which other part of the world will you get something like this?
Yeah.
So I think that kinds of makes it way more easier. And way more, I would say, entrepreneurial friendly, if I'm used to allow that quote, and yeah, give wings to your dreams.
Interesting. It makes sense why you've chosen to do it here, given the focus of the brand and the positioning.
Yes.
On all sides. And what does that say about what's next? What does that, does that sort of say, many people on this show, they look at Dubai sometimes as it's big enough, it's in the UAE, the economy is big enough here, the audience is big enough, and then some people think of regional focus, so entering neighboring markets, and other people think of, well, I'm going to make an app, and this app can be international, and it doesn't matter if it's set up in Silicon Valley or Dubai, like Dubai to the world sort of approach. What's your thinking? What's your vision?
Interesting. So far, I mean, to answer the question on the digital side, yes, the brand, we do have our own digital footprint with which we ship worldwide. In terms of the brick and mortar, the brand is there in Singapore, Bahrain, London, in my hometown, and in Dubai.
Oh, wow, already.
Yes, in select multi-curated
Which is your hometown?
In India.
Mumbai. All right.
Mumbai is where the brand is thriving. Apart from that, in terms of where would I want to take the brand forward next? Is on other TPA, as in other third-party aggregator marketplace platforms, the right ones, where they have the appetite for sustainable brands.
What are some good third-party? What are some marketplaces for jewelry that we should know about?
I would say hands down Net-a-Porter, because they have a whole section called Net Sustain. I am waiting for that day when they would knock the door and say, you know what, are you House of Biori? Please come on board, because we have an appetite. And if they're listening to this show, please, Richard
Priyanka,
has my details.
Let them come to you. They will, I'm sure.
Farfetch is another platform
Yeah.
where they're doing a lot of work on sustainable brands. Unas is doing some fantastic work. Yes, again, a great platform to be into. Guys, if you're listening, please come forward. So one is that, getting into these digital formats. Second is expanding your roots into the other cities, other countries within GCC. Because I think, again, the appetite here in terms of understanding sustainable-led brands, I think, is an evolving appetite. So because it's an evolving appetite, it has a lot of capability of consuming newness rather than getting into a market which is already saturated with many more players like this. So I think, and it's exciting because the city is ever changing. GCC on the whole is ever changing. There are a lot of volatilities as we speak about. But keeping that aside, I think there is definitely a very big scope of expanding, and that's precisely what we would love to do over the period of time. Yes, getting onto the metaverse environment with probably some characters who would want to adorn jewelry. Why not? We could get a full jewelry led costume done for them. So that's another thing that
explore digital trends more.
Yeah, because my son is very pro AI. So that's one thing that I would love to see give if everything works right, getting into that environment. Because I think that whole aspect of staying digitally agile is very important, because that is the tone that is going to stay for a long time now. So you cannot not engage with that tone.
Totally agree.
But yes, I would, whatever said and done, it needs to remain purpose driven. It needs to remain content driven. I, at any point of time, would not want to uproot or change the basics of the brand. The brand thrives on forward thinking, team spirit, respect, craftsmanship, and quality. And I would want to keep that constant, no matter what medium or what mode of communication that we choose to thrive on.
Excellent, brilliant. I was going to ask another question, but that would have been a nice one to finish on. But let's ask a little bit about sort of the macroeconomic.
Sure.
You've already survived and got through a pandemic,
right?
And now we're on the other side of that. Hopefully, generally, you know, we're in a city in the Middle East,
right?
And the Middle East is often spoken of as an emerging market,
right?
And you know, India, a country that you're from, used to be spoken about as an emerging market, one of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and two of them emerged.
Right.
India and China emerged as markets. Like the Indian market is massive now. There's emerging middle class. There's so many things that have really evolved in that economy.
Correct.
Thriving economy, GDP growth is really high. But two of the others didn't. And what you know, we're in Dubai and we see the economy growing here, but what's your view on that spilling over and that sort of that creativity and that business environment across the Middle East? And will it be a market that emerges like India?
See, given the absolute dynamics in terms of the size and scale of India versus UAE, there will always be a difference, because UAE is not even a fraction in terms of the basic size that we're talking versus India. So that difference is always going to stay.
But I mean, but the 22 Arab League countries are 300, 400 million people, one third of the size of India.
Right.
So maybe not as big. No one's as big as India, kind of, I think. But do you see what I mean on the sort of region?
But because it's big and because it's a democratic, it will have its share of uncertainties. It will have its share of, the various political turmoils and the economic diversities that one keeps seeing in that country, vis-a-vis in a more controlled environment like the GCC or the Arab in specific, where the rules are very well laid out. So when the rules are very well laid out, there is definitely the clarity in terms of how to take things forward. And our leader is an absolute visionary. I mean, what Sheikh has done, I don't think anybody in the world would have thought of doing it in such a short span of time.
True.
So from that aspect, I think the road to success, or the road to a magnum opus success, probably would be easier as compared to India as a market, because for India to pick up anything and make it happen at the national level, there are a lot of internal battles that the country first need to deal with before it gets onto the external side. And unfortunately, fortunately, that remains the story of that country. So in bits and pieces, there are some amazing work that the country is doing. We have some of the most amazing talents from the country who's ruling the world in various pockets. But at the same time, there are these uncertainties and there are these dualities of decisions, which does take the focus a little off from where it should be. On the other hand, in this region, there is no, I would say, confusion on focus, for starters. Because it's small, it's tight. And because it's tight, execution is faster. And because execution is faster, decision making is faster. So it all kinds of, the speed at which this place is growing or this place will continue to grow, I don't think it's a fair comparison to do that with India.
Fair enough. But you're optimistic about this region. You
Absolutely,
think
absolutely. I mean, a lot of people say that, yes, you're living in a bubble. That's one of the most favorite comments that we probably, I'm sure when you are with your friends and back in your hometown, they would have that. Oh, you're living in Dubai.
Yeah.
It's everything is well laid to you. But I think to remain in that so-called bubble also takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of consistent amount of efforts and work and needs a huge amount of forward thinking, which I think is something that the government is constantly doing. And it is people pro. Yes, it has its own restrictions. It has its own, for some people this could be a disadvantage. But then if you are able to go by the rule book, I think you're pretty sustained. And now with the whole thing of golden visa and letting people come and open up their business pods in the country, allowing everybody and anybody to come forward and pitch their idea and invest in the place. It's great because it's going to be a continuous cycle of progress. The challenge, or rather the only flip side of it, would be the choices that one will make in letting whom to sustain and whom not to sustain. But yes, I think it'll always, it's going to stay the way I think we are right now, where the appetite towards innovation stays constant.
And progress. Brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts this morning, Priyanka. I loved hearing about House of Biori, and we'll check it out online.
It's an absolute honor.
On Instagram, House of Biori.
Yes, on Instagram it is @the Biori.
Yeah.
Which is where you can reach me out, drop me a line, connect with me. My personal page is also there. If there is anything you want to know about this quirky, flawed designer, please give me a shout out on that page.
Amazing. Well, really pleasure speaking to you this morning.
Likewise.
Thanks a lot for sharing, and we'll follow in future.
Thank you so much.
Cool. That was another great Dubai business story, or a startup that's trying its best to fit in with the city and fit in with the new trends. I found it really interesting about the sustainability aspect, that we often think of sustainability in fashion is the big companies need to do a lot better with retail and with clothing, but of course it can be other parts of fashion as well, especially jewellery. So thanks to Priyanka for sharing that, and do have a look out wherever you're in any of the places she mentioned or online, and see if you like their jewellery as well. Thank you to Ali, who produced the show today, and Radwa. Get well soon to Shahir, who's on leave today, and we'll be back next week for another episode. We do have these episodes lined up 8 to 10 weeks in advance, and as we go live on Friday mornings at 11, even if they're booked in advance, if there is a cancellation last minute, as happens last week, we often don't have someone to stand in, so we miss a week. And we don't like missing weeks because we've been going non-stop since 2019. This is episode 173, and we don't really don't like missing weeks, but generally people don't cancel last minute. So pointing at no one in particular, but just a reminder that we like to bring a new episode to you guys every week. And in the summer months, people are traveling, and it's hard to kind of keep that frequency up, but we won't take a summer break and we don't take a winter break, and we will be here every Friday. You can catch it on smashy.tv online and any of the apps. It's on more and more smart TVs these days, Apple TV, Sony, and of course the apps as well. We've a lot of exciting things coming soon on Smashy over the summer, and if you like this show, there's similar shows to this. There's Conversations with Lulu, there's Business is Personal, with Corey Block, with Dr. Corey Block, and there's also Hala Bassam with Tech Bil Arabi, and she's a lot of the good Arab startup founders on her show as well. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be back next week.